It's 6:30 and we have a lot of agenda, so I'd like to get going. I'm going to call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order. My name is Jeff Bodmer-Turner. I'm the Assistant Chair. Eli Bowling, our Chair, is unable to be with us tonight, so I will be conducting the meeting. And before we get started, I would ask you to remain muted until you wish to speak, and then first raise your hand. And I will, when I have an opportunity to recognize you, I will, and then you can speak. I'd like to take any public input on items that are not on the agenda. Okay. I have one announcement. Actually, I have two. For the past week, I've been suffering from a nasty bronchitis, and the doctors assure me that I will get better at some time, but I will have some challenges speaking tonight. So I'll do the best that I can. The more important announcement is that tonight is the last night of the, the 40-hour survey of public opinion for the limited commercial district. That's available on the town website. And I would really encourage everyone who's in attendance at this meeting, and if you've already filled it out, to fill it out, and if you already have, to contact people that you know and have them fill it out, because it'll be taken down tonight to have the information collated. Okay. So the first item on our agenda is a continuation of the public hearing with National Grid concerning conduit construction at Summer and Beach Streets. I'd like a motion to bring this meeting back to order.
So moved, Jeff.
Okay, I think we have both a moved and a second, John and Ann.
Yes.
This is a request to install a new manhole in 330 feet of trench for conduit beginning at a point in the middle of the intersection of Summer and Beach and continuing approximately 346 feet in an easterly direction. And I believe, Steve Gang, are you here? No, it's not Steve Gang. Who is it? Matthew Farron.
Yes, right, Jeff, I was muted. This is Steve Gang.
Okay. Actually, I'm looking for the National Grid rep, and I think that's Matthew Farron. Is that correct?
Yes, that's me. Can you hear me, Jeff?
I can hear you now. Okay, Matthew, last week when we met on this, 2 weeks ago, we asked for a couple of conditions on this, that you start after Columbus Day, October 12th, and that the work take place at night, preferably starting after 9 o'clock. You were going to go back and check with your people about that, and I wonder how that worked out.
Yes, so we have done that. You requested that we start after Columbus Day. That won't be a problem. We most likely won't begin construction of this until springtime. You also asked if we could perform the work at night, and we can. Our civil crew would prefer to have their night hours to be 10 p.m. to 6 a.m.
That's fine. That's fine. But you're not going to start this work until spring?
That's correct, yes.
When do you expect to be done?
Not exactly sure on a time frame, but to build the manhole and to put in the 330 feet roughly of the duct bank, I would imagine it would be a week, probably not longer than 2.
Okay,
Is
Matt,
there a reason, oh, I'm sorry, Jeff, may I ask a question?
sure, go ahead.
I'm curious, if the work is not going to be done for another 6 months, does it make sense that we approve this now, so far in advance?
I mean, we need the time to be able to get the resources together to be able to do this. When the job has been completed on our design side of everything, that's just how our normal process flows. Once the design's done, then we take it to town petition if anything needs to be done in the public way. And then the job continues there on afterwards to, schedule our resources and make sure our guys are scheduled to do that work. 'Cause it's
So
gonna
you
be-
all, go ahead, I'm sorry, Jeff.
I assume that you're going to notify Chuck Dam, the DPW director, when you're coming on site.
We certainly can, yes.
That would be a condition of this
right.
approval.
Jeff,
Greg?
I have a question for Matt. Matt, when we met a couple of weeks ago, I mean, our impression was it was the fall. Has something changed that has pushed this off to the spring? I can't recall exactly what your expectations were in terms of scheduling then.
No, nothing had changed as far as I was aware. I don't believe that. I don't think anybody really wants to open the road, so getting close to November. and
Okay.
it's coming up. I think it was always planned to have be starting in the spring.
Okay, all right. I'm just wondering what the typical lead times are for projects that you folks work on. Do you need 3 or 4 months to, I mean, I'm sure you're planning ahead, but I don't know when you start to pull the trigger in terms of real planning. But springtime that's a ways off.
Having worked for the company for a few years, the more time we have, the better.
Okay.
I would like to stipulate, though, that if there's any change, any variation or deviation from this plan, that it needs to come back to the board, please.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'd like to ask Greg if you have any comment on approving this tonight.
No, I don't. I think it's fine for you to do that. As Becky indicated, we would certainly stipulate that it would be, any changes would have to come back before you, but I don't think there's a harm in giving it approval this evening, given the various conditions you want to put on, and then having to abide by that when they get to it.
Okay,
Jeff, I have one other, I'd like to just expand a little on the stipulation you were saying regarding DPW.
Yeah.
That if National Grid would fill out a DPW road opening permit as part of the process, once the Board of Selectmen has given approval, I think that should be part of the recommendation or requirement.
I'd like to know when spring is going to come.
And we all would.
Yeah, but this is the National Grid spring that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Is it
So I think the
April?
I think the question, Matthew, is whether, when would be the earliest you would start this?
I have absolutely no idea. I'm not in charge of scheduling. I'm not in charge of
Okay,
getting the boots on the ground. I
Then-
didn't do this job. I'm just the guy that's presenting it.
then I think we want to stipulate that you would be done by May 15th.
To be done by May 15th.
Yeah,
Okay, so noted.
Okay. Anybody else on the board?
I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, miss, but I think you asked a question that I didn't get to answer.
Which one? Becky?
DPW road opening permit?
Yeah,
I believe permits are filled up before any time we dig in the road. I will certainly make note of that to the other engineers and the crews that are going to be involved in this, but I believe that's standard procedure.
Okay, I just, this is something that Chuck, the head of DPW, brought up to me specifically, specifically regarding National Grid. So that's why I mentioned it this evening, that the road opening permit from National Grid. So as long as that's done, it'll be great. And how
Okay.
much notice would we receive once you decide to, or once National Grid decides to start, just so that we can make sure we have the needed people available?
So you'd like to be notified when we start?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
So you would like to be notified when we start?
Before you start, so that we can be prepared.
Becky, I believe that's in the road opening permit,
Great, thank you.
when they would start, when work is expected to commence.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you, Jeffrey. I didn't know that, but thank you.
Okay, so any other comments from the board?
Just to make sure that the road is returned to as good or hopefully better condition when the work is done.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any public comment? Please raise your hand. Okay, none noted. I'd like to get a motion to close the evidentiary portion of our hearing.
So moved.
Move. Second.
Okay, and roll call vote. John?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
And Mr. Bodmer-Turner says yes. Okay, now, the motion itself. This is a motion to grant National Grid a permit to install a new manhole and 330 feet of trenching conduit, cement trenching conduit, beginning at a point approximately 0 feet north of the center line of the intersection of Beach Street and Summer Street, and continuing approximately 346 feet in an east direction. The conditions of this permit are that a road opening permit is submitted prior to the start of any work in a timely manner. That the work starts after October 12th, but I guess that's a moot point. That there's a nighttime restriction and that the crew will be in place starting at 10 o'clock until 6 a.m. That you return the road to similar or better condition as with any construction like this.
And done by May 15th.
Right.
And that the work is completed by May 15th.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote. Ms. Harrison?
You're muted, Ann.
Yes.
Mr. Round?
Yes.
Ms. Jakes?
Yes.
Mr. Bodmer-Turner votes yes. Okay. Matthew?
Thank you all very much. Do
All right.
appreciate your time.
Thank you. All right. The next item on our agenda is the F-22 goals and priorities for FY22 budget. And I'm going to turn this one over to Greg so I can talk less.
Okay. No, off to a good start, Jeff. Thank you. So yes, though it seems early, it is time for department heads and me to get underway on crafting the budget for FY22. which will be presented to voters at, assuming a Springtown meeting in April. We're certainly hoping for that. So it is very helpful to have you folks give us some indication as to your goals and priorities. In particular, this past year, we, for this current year, and when we were debating the budget in the spring, we decided to make some reductions in expenditures in order to keep the tax rate level. And so instead of the typical 2 to 2.5% tax hike that we normally ask voters to support, this current year's budget required that we had a level funding of the tax rate. So the main impact that had was to curtail some of our capital spending. We have been working hard to play catch up on our infrastructure needs and have worked hard to put in place a rolling 5-year plan that allows us to catch up on our deferred infrastructure needs. So we've been doing well on that. Obviously, we have slipped in this current year because of the lower amount of taxation, and thus we trimmed a number of capital projects. We did a little bit of operating, but the majority of the reductions came from the capital budget. So it's looking forward to your decisions here, but I've heard from the Finance Committee, they are of an opinion that we should get back on track with capital and that they would support going forward with the more normal 2 to 2.5% tax increase in order to have the funds to continue on the capital plan as well as operating. And so that is an indication that they have given and need to hear from you as well. And then if you have other priorities in mind in terms of different departmental operations that you feel need a particular focus or not, and if there are new initiatives that you have a particular interest in, this is a good time to be airing those so that we can start thinking about how we get those into the budget. So obviously this isn't the be in and end all to your guidance. It's really the beginning, but it does help us, the department heads and myself, as we craft the preliminary budget. It's very helpful to hear from you what your initial thoughts are on not only the total budget in terms of taxation, but also particular areas that you might have of interest and or concern, and that you would give us some initial guidance on. So that is what I was hoping we could have tonight for a discussion. Here's some of your initial thoughts on these topics.
Okay.
Greg, yep.
So any board comments?
Yeah, I have a question for Greg. And Greg, so it was level taxation last year, and if you go back the past 3, 4, 5 years or so, has there been a trend line that's more or less kind of 2% each year? I just can't recall.
Yeah, it's really been closer to the 2.5 every year.
Okay, okay.
Of course, we did have the override for, or not the override, but the debt exclusion for the new school.
Right, but excluding that, it's been the trend line has been around 2, 2.5 then.
Correct.
So now we held the line last year, so that means we're continuing that trend line, but at a lower level. It's parallel, but at a slightly lower level.
That's right.
Okay, and has the Finance Committee said anything about that? I mean, they realize that, I'm sure.
Right, right.
But they're okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
The Finance Committee, John, I think is concerned about falling behind in capital improvements.
And that's why I bring that up, because that line now is a little bit lower, still trending at the same rate, but it's a little bit lower, and I was just
Right, so they see it, bring it back up to where we've had it over the last few years.
Well, you won't catch up because you had a year that was flat.
Right.
Unless you go to 5%.
Correct. And
I don't think we're going to do that.
No.
Yes. They weren't advocating for that.
No,
But they
okay,
were
so
advocating
that's,
for
that's
going back to
the
a-
point I'm trying to get at
Yeah.
here.
Right, right. So yes, we slipped a year, but they prefer not to slip further.
Okay,
We were, I think, somewhat concerned about revenues last spring.
Mhm.
And it appears that the revenues are, well, it's nice being a residential town because we didn't lose anything from, or much from other tax sources. But right now, my feeling is, yes, we should pick up capital projects, and in particular, we should look very hard at picking up the operating costs, the operating expenses that we cut, which reduce the effectiveness of the town government.
Mhm.
So I would restore the operating first and then restore as much as we can within 2.5 of the capital.
So your priority would be operating over CapEx.
Yes.
Okay, we have a number of large capital expenses. There's the town contribution to the rotunda grants that we're trying to get to repair the rotunda.
Mhm.
There's restoring the money that was cut from the fire engine fund. There's, excuse me, the Sweeney Park engineering study. And there's whatever happens with senior center. So those are just 5 that came right to the top of my head.
Mhm.
And Jeff, if I may jump
Go
in,
ahead.
you know, talking about the senior center and what potential options are being looked at for the LCD. You know, I wonder if that's something we marry in there, where hopefully or potentially we can have an aging in place facility or something along those lines. So I'm wondering if it, you know, I know we desperately need something now. I don't know if there's a way that we could come up with a temporary interim. But I just think we have a lot of massive changes coming in the next several years. And if there are ways that we can look down the road and apply monies then, as opposed to spending now, and then in 5 years' time, have a different, better solution. That's one thing. One of the other things that I really would like to look at coming up with fiscal year 22 is how we approach education and how it may be morphing with what is our new reality for the foreseeable future. I think that's something that we really greatly need to look at. And my last point that I'd like to support would be DPW has been under supported financially for some time now. And they're the ones who keep our town looking, not only looking nice, but the roads drivable and maintained. So those are what my focuses would be right now.
Okay. John?
I'm fine with the 2.5% that you indicated. I agree that 5 is very, that's not
Other
really
question.
reasonable. That's not really reasonable. I did look at the budget and how things were kind of moved around, I guess, for the Plan B, where there were certain operating costs that were cut. I would agree with Ann that we should look at the operating things first. But one thing in particular I need some information on is the school budget, because this whole thing includes the school budget, which of course will come out of the school committee, and we're not sure where that's going to be. And in fact, I don't think they're sure where it's going to be, because those costs are really kind of in flux depending upon how things evolve over the coming months.
Yep.
And I think we have to keep some level of flexibility here, because hybrid models are more expensive than remote models. And I mean, we're not as close to that as the school committee is, but I think that's a little bit of a wild card here.
The school committee budget process is actually just getting underway as well.
Yes.
And you're correct that there are a lot of unknowns, including what happens over the next several months with reintegrating students into the schools.
Right.
So I think that we're going to be running parallel processes, and we need to look at, on the town side, what our needs are. And then, as we have in the past, look at both the town and the school and see where we need to go from here. I want to clarify one thing that Becky said, which is in regards to the 40R, the limited commercial district, and senior center. I don't think that the plan is to create a senior center of the senior activity center and an office space for the Council on Aging in the limited commercial district. That would defeat our purposes in trying to increase tax revenue through other sources. The idea of promoting a assisted living in limited commercial district is a very interesting idea, and it has been proposed in discussions that I've heard. So those two things are different items. Assisted living center is a commercial operation, and the senior center is a town operation. The senior activity center is a town operation. So I think we need to keep those clearly separated.
It's still town land up there. And if that's where you have the bulk of seniors residing, wouldn't it make sense to have a senior center where you have a larger percentage?
Where do you get the bulk of seniors are going to be residing in the limited commercial district?
I guess that was actually a leap on my part.
Well, there would need to be dramatically different housing plan for the LCD. There may be seniors in 40B.
Talking 40B, I'm talking 40R, which has a minimum.
I
It has to
understand.
be, it has to be 50% residential up there for mixed. If you do the mixed use. Anyway, I'm diverting this process, and that's not what I meant to do, nor should we. So pulling back on that and redirecting my comment, Jeff, I just think that how we're going to be growing over the next several years and being extra cautious in terms of, excuse me, sneeze, but just being extra cautious. But and in terms of the tax hike, I'd be more in favor of 2% as opposed to 2.5%.
Okay.
Further comment on the senior center discussions that we're having. Is that something that might affect our fiscal 22 budget? If something comes around to that?
Yep.
Okay. I'd put that on the list, Jeff. I
Excuse
put that
me.
pretty high on my list.
Further discussion of the senior center.
Yes, but we've
Yeah.
had various discussions about how things might evolve there
Yes,
with both locations.
yes.
And I don't know what'll happen over the next 6 months to 18 months, but something very well could, and that would directly affect this budget. And I would certainly
Mhm.
add it to the rotunda and the fire engine fund and Sweeney Park and whatever else you had mentioned.
Right.
Slightly off topic. Has there been any progress on the assessment of the Masonic building?
We are close to having an assessor finally getting started, an appraiser, I should say.
Appraiser, yes.
So yes, it's taking a little while to get the I's dotted, but we're close to having that underway.
And equally sort of off topic, would it be possible to put the Tux Point ramp project into a special town meeting so that the funds could be used immediately rather than after the 1st of July, so that we don't lose 2 full years?
So I don't foresee holding a meeting prior to April.
No.
But we can do a special, or we can just appropriate those funds out of existing funds rather than new taxation for the new fiscal year. So in either case, there are ways to have it get started in early spring.
Okay, so this is a general discussion. We're going to get down into the weeds a lot more as we go along. But I'm hearing various ideas about whether to prioritize the restoration of operating expense or CapEx, and what items would fall underneath each of those. There any other comments that board members want to make? Okay. So there's no need for any vote at this point, but we will certainly be taking this up in future meetings as we develop the budget. I want to move on. Our next item, excuse me, our next item is a 40B project update. And Greg, I'm going to give it back to you.
Sure, thank you. So as you know, we did receive the rather extensive submittals from the applicant for a project on Upper School Street. This is on land about 20 or 23 acres or so, land that is across from Atwater Avenue. It's undeveloped land currently, and the applicant is proposing fairly large apartment complex. There'd be 157 units, a mixture of one bedroom, mostly one bedroom, like 80 or so one bedroom, and then 2 bedroom, as well as 16 or so 3 bedroom units. So this, as a 40B, enables, because it's a 40B, the project applicant has the ability to basically not follow to the letter our zoning regulations. So they are able to have a more dense project, a larger project, et cetera, than is normally called for zoning. Due to the fact that we do not have a minimum of 10% of our housing stock as designated formally as affordable housing. So as indicated to you and in an article in the Cricket, the process gets underway more seriously now. So the next step would be for you to host a meeting with the applicant where they would provide a fairly in-depth presentation to you and the public about the proposal. And between now and that meeting, it would be helpful for you to receive input from different boards and committees. And I know that Eli has reached out to the chairs of the various land use boards in particular, as well as a few others, to provide some input as we get underway. So the applicant would like to proceed along the lines of what is affectionately called a friendly 40B, meaning that the applicant seeks to enter into a development agreement with you as the leaders of the community prior to the formal permitting process getting underway. And so they would like to meet with you over the course of the next few months to see if there are ways for them to mitigate the impacts that you see from the project. And if you and the developer come to agreement as to what those impacts are and what the mitigation measures best be. So we will undertake the next few months to go through that negotiating process. And so I would suggest that we hold that initial meeting either the end of October or early November. That would give us the next few weeks to continue to prepare and review the materials and to receive input, both public input and from the boards and committees in particular. So anticipating that we go through a negotiating process and we conclude that negotiation process, let's say by end of January. If the conclusion is indeed an agreement is signed, then that becomes sort of the launching pad for the developer to then proceed with their formal permitting process before the ZBA, the Zoning Board of Adjustment. So the zoning board is the formal permitting granting authority locally, and they issue what is called a comprehensive permit, and it consolidates the review process of all the different boards into the zoning board. That process gets underway whether or not you have entered into a development agreement. If you have a development agreement, then that becomes a good starting point for the developer as they present to the ZBA. And the ZBA would most likely then would incorporate that agreement within their permit that they eventually grant. If there is no development agreement, then you as a board and other boards as well can basically present testimony before the ZBA and in hopes that the ZBA incorporates your suggestions, but the developer doesn't have to agree to those. If the ZBA puts it into their final permit, then the developer always has the option of appealing to the state. And the state is the ultimate decider in 40B projects. When we don't qualify what are called the safe harbor qualifications. And those safe harbors, meaning that we would be able to block a 40B, there are three of them. One is, one is if we are over the 10% for affordable housing. We are not, we're a little under 5%. Another is if the total amount of land in town that is devoted currently to affordable housing is over 1.5%. We don't meet that threshold either. We're under 1% of total lands. The senior housing, both at the Plains and at Newport Park, and also the few houses up on Loading Place Road, those projects qualify as affordable, but their land total falls quite a bit short of that 1.5% of total land mass, even after taking out land set aside for conservation and other municipal uses. The third safe harbor is whether or not we have made substantial progress on our housing production plan. And again, while efforts have certainly been undertaken to try to advance that plan, we don't have new units to show for it at this time. So we don't qualify for any of those three safe harbors, meaning that the project as a 40B can proceed, and ultimately the state can say, yes, it can go forward. So I think it behooves us, as we have talked about in the past, to undertake an effort to see if we can come to an agreement with the developer. And so we should use the next few months to do so. And the next step in that is setting a meeting. You could target the last Monday in October. I believe that's the 26th, if I've got that correct. We could target that as a special meeting for you, where the developer would come in to give a fairly detailed presentation, go through the submittals, and that would be the kickoff really of our discussions with them about the project and potential mitigations that could be agreed to in order for the project to go forward. So tonight really need your thoughts on when we should hold the meeting, and any other thoughts you have in terms of diving into the details of the project and discussing potential mitigating measures.
Do we need to make a vote on the meeting date?
No, we don't need a formal vote, but if you want to target that, I can certainly get, if they're nodding on their heads that is a good date, then I can get back with the developers and see if that works for them, and then we can proceed from there.
Okay. Let me just poll the board on that item as to whether that's acceptable in terms of the initial presentation. This is not particularly a negotiating session, more clarification of what excuse me, the project entails. So I want to take a quick poll of the board. John?
Yes.
That's okay?
Yep,
Ann?
26 is good.
There's a lot of material in that not in the presentation, but in what they have given us already.
Yes.
Yeah, 170 pages of traffic study, for instance. Are we really going to absorb all of that in another 3 weeks with everything else, anything else that we're going on?
A lot of it is data. I've gone through some of it, and like the traffic study is really 46 pages, and then 150 pages of printouts that you probably don't want to look at. But I agree, it's a lot of stuff. I've started to wade through it.
And you certainly you shouldn't feel like you have to have everything studied and memorized and ready for a test come the 26th. It's really...
we should know where there are pitfalls, and one of them is the way that they have decided that they will evaluate the cost to the schools.
Mm-hmm.
Because while it's true that adding one child costs very little in terms of actual, if you add a whole classroom, you've got 20 times 18,000, and not, it's, as in the airplane example, you put somebody into an empty seat, that's profit, no matter how little. If you put somebody in and you now have to fly another airplane, that's a big problem. So I haven't studied that in any depth, and I plan to.
Greg, is it expected that the input that is coming from, say, the other boards that are involved here, that would come after October? We don't have to assimilate that other information as well prior to this. This is really, for October 26th, it's just becoming familiar with the materials provided by what is it, Strategic Land Ventures, the proposal.
Right, that's correct.
Okay.
Obviously, it's helpful to have some feedback
Yeah.
from different boards by then, but again, it's not the deadline for feedback, and that there'd be ample opportunity going forward from that point. And again, it's your decision as to when you would ever say, okay, we're ready to enter into an agreement. If you need more information and you need more consultation with boards, you take that time.
My concern is that we have 2 relatively unencumbered months, and then we get into Christmas and, December, and it's relatively hard to make time for things. And if you're hoping to have an agreement by January, I think that's optimistic.
Yeah, so it may be February, maybe March. So I agree with that. There's just a comment on the chat. Someone wanted to know when the plans might be available. And so we have put the submittals on the town website. So those are available to the public, just like they are to the different board members as well.
Mm-hmm.
If the person's interested, they just go to town website and type in 40B and it will come up. You look for what Mr. Federspiel has provided, and it's right on there.
And it comes in multiple pieces.
Many pieces.
Like 30.
Yes.
Exactly, lots. And Tiffany just did the direct link, so that's great. Greg, my question and I don't necessarily have a problem meeting October 26th if that's our first one. There's no way I will be able to get through everything by that time with work and other obligations. Do we have, is town council looking over this at this point?
So we do have the ability to bring in John Whitten in particular, who
Yep.
is well versed. He gave the overview, if you recall.
Yep.
And so, yes, we can rely on his expertise to help us go through this and to figure out what it all means.
Great, because I personally think it would be nice to have John's feedback prior to meeting with the developers. What do you think? Do you think that's not as critical?
Well, I think it'd be very helpful to have at least the initial take on what he thinks of the materials.
Yeah.
Again, it's not the final be all, but an initial review and some initial comments certainly would be helpful.
All right,
And again,
thank you.
I'm not trying to force you on the October meeting. If you're more comfortable pushing out a couple of weeks and do it mid-November, that's okay. You should do what you're comfortable doing.
I would probably personally feel better pushing it out a little bit then. I don't know how everybody else feels, and I'm happy certainly to do what the majority would like at this point. It's just, I'd be a little more comfortable with a little more time to chew on this.
I'm a little bit concerned about that in light of what Ann just said. And this is not a primary negotiation session. This is an initial presentation. Gives them an opportunity to, polish it up and present it to us in the clearest way that they can. So I would tend towards going for the 26th and then having an opportunity to go back, reconnoiter, talk further with our committees, and have a second meeting with them during November.
There is a conflict on the 26th with the planning board meeting.
Okay.
So later that week, potentially, or,
I think the planning board was the 19th.
Sue Brown just put in the chat that it's the 26th.
Okay.
Sue?
Yes, it's the 26th. We're meeting with the Board of Selectmen on the 19th to go over the zoning changes, so.
right.
Oh, thrilling.
The planning board typically has the 4th.
Yeah, so the 19th is going over recodification with the planning board.
Mhm.
Or if the time of the presentation could be juggled somehow. I'm not sure if you're set on a time. I know there's a lot to work around.
Any conflicts with the 27th?
Yes.
And yes,
Yes, there is a conflict.
yes, there is a conflict. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a conflict. I don't know if it matters, but ZBA meeting is on the 28th.
That's-
29th?
I think that's let's see.
31st?
No,
Wide open.
How about the 29th?
I don't have anything at this moment.
That would also allow members of the planning board to participate in this.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Any
Have Sue Brown.
objection with Greg approaching, excuse me, approaching them on this? Ridiculous.
Sounds like it's okay.
As
We'll
long
give
as
it a
it works
try.
for the developers.
Yep, we'll give it a try.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? As long as?
No, I
Yeah,
said
so-
as long as it works for the developers. Will this be posted on the calendar then as well? Town calendar?
Absolutely. It's town meeting. It's a public
Yeah.
meeting.
It's a public meeting, yes.
I was just answering Steve Gang, basically.
Well, I think he's looking for a clarification if the public will be asked to comment at that particular meeting, or will it primarily be a presentation?
Greg?
So it's up to you how you want to handle that. I think some clarifying questions certainly might be helpful. I don't know if it's not a time to really debate the merits of it. It's really a time to understand what they're proposing. So I think questions along the lines of what they're proposing and clarifications rather than the merits for this initial meeting is probably more appropriate. There'll certainly be ample time to talk about merits, as we get into it. But I think initially, we want to try to understand as fully as possible what the project is. So the answer is yes. I think you can allow some questions, but I think they should be targeted towards understanding what the proposal is.
Mhm.
Any other board comments?
Just that as Becky had suggested, we want to make sure we get John Witten's comments or overview before that date.
Maybe by Monday, the 26th,
Good.
if not sooner.
Right. Thank you. That would be appreciated.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm only 15 minutes behind. Um,
Not shabby.
Our next item on the agenda is COVID-19 updates. And Greg, I'm sorry to say, step 2 of 3. You're
Yeah,
on.
no, happy to run through this fairly quickly. So I think, as most of you know, the governor has announced moving into step 2 of phase 3. We were in phase 1 for quite a while, since early July. Not a big impact on us here in Manchester because we don't have indoor performance venues. That was one of the things that is now allowed to open up at 50% capacity, up to 250 people. Outdoor performance venues, again, not something we have. They can have 50% of what they normally have, again, up to 250 people. Arcades, indoor skating rinks, laser games, those sort of things, all allowed now at 50% capacity. Fitting rooms are allowed to open up for retail stores. Gyms, museums, libraries, all now able to operate at 50% of normal capacity. So those are the bigger changes in going to step 2 of phase 3. This is for communities that are not in the red, if you will. Being in the red means you have 8 cases per 100,000 or more. So we are not in that category, thankfully. We continue to have very low cases that we know about. So that's all good. The limit to indoor gatherings is still at 25. That did not change. Outdoor gatherings in private backyards, residences, etc., that is still kept at 50 people. Oh, I'm sorry, it's gone up to 50. No, I think it remains at 50. In any case, it's 50. Outdoor gatherings and public settings did increase from 50 to 100. In addition, in a previous modification, the governor did allow restaurants to seat up to 10 people at a table rather than the 6 that was allowed. And seating, serving food at bars is now allowed as well, as long as the 6-foot separation is maintained or there is like a plexiglass divider between people at the bar. So those are some other changes that have occurred. So people are nervous, I would say, as we head into the fall here. Less ability to be outdoors as the weather cools down. And certainly with schools, whether universities, colleges, high schools, etc., or other schools getting elementary as well, as those ramp up to in-person. I think there's just a degree of nervousness. We are seeing an uptick in cases in the state. They seem to be really focused on or being caused by parties where people are getting together in larger groups. A lot of that's being driven by college campuses, I think, and college students in general. But we are seeing increases, and the infection rate has gone up. And so I think it's fair to say there's a fair amount of nervousness, even though there's a real desire to continue to open up. So that's just some what's happening sort of at the macro level at the state. Like I say, not too large of an impact here in town. The MAC can be up to 50% now with this new ruling. And as I said, the restaurants can have a bigger bigger gatherings at a single table. So things continue to go fairly well in town, I'm pleased to say. As I say, our cases, we have not seen any significant uptick. And we'll see what the rest of the fall brings. And concern, obviously, about flu season coming in, having flu and COVID to deal with at the same time. But hopefully we'll continue to have the good track record that we've had over the last few months.
So
let's go ahead.
In regard to flu season, I just wanted to make a comment that there are going to be flu shots by appointment at Town Hall on Wednesday. And you need to make the appointment ahead of time. And all that detail is on the website.
Yeah, so certainly encouraging folks to get their flu shots either through public nurse at Town Hall or through your own physician or at the drugstores that provide that as well. Multiple opportunities there. So I think that brings us up to talking a bit about Halloween and the plans for this year. Again, a COVID Halloween. So we have some recommendations that a group, Park and Rec and some Board of Health folks, Tom Keogh and others who have been traditionally involved and has always stepped forward and done a great job putting together a nice event. I think to sum it up this year is trying to keep large crowds down and sticking to your neighborhood for the most part, rather than having everyone converge on the village, the streets around Norwood, Brook, that area, which has always been sort of the hotspot, if you will, for Halloween, trick-or-treating. So to avoid that this year, so we don't have big crowds in one area. Jeff, I don't know if you'd like Tom to walk through this.
Tom, would you like to join us at this point? You need to unmute yourself. Oh, maybe I do. Hold on.
All right, how's that?
That's better.
All right, thank you. Jeff, by the way, I got into Manchester without any state of New Hampshire cruisers behind me, so I feel safe and blessed.
I was talking at 6 o'clock, actually about 26, with Tom, and he was in Concord, New Hampshire. We won't discuss how he got here. Go ahead, Tom.
Nice, Tom.
Yes, I've been on the meeting for approximately 4 minutes at the present moment. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I think Greg gave you some detail on this. What we tried to do this year was take people who traditionally put parts of the Halloween celebration together, kind of as individuals, and put them together as a group, including the Community Center, the Manchester Mothers Club, the Police Patrolmen's Association, and the Halloween Committee, and got them together for a meeting to try and come up with activities that could be enjoyed, but hopefully be enjoyed safely. So what we presented to you is a list of these activities, and this same list is being presented to the Board of Health. We took into consideration the CDC guidelines for those things that were low risk, moderate risk, and high risk. And everything that we've done in terms of the 24th with the community center pumpkin pickup, the house decorating, getting ready for that, the Halloween committee and police doing a register and pick up goodie bags are all in the low risk. The only thing that is in the moderate risk category is the trick-or-treating, which we're, as Greg has already mentioned, we are working on. You can see that we're not going to block off any roads, which creates the kind of party atmosphere between Norwood Avenue, Desmond Avenue, Brook Street, Allen Avenue, and Vine Street, that area of the village, and just people being with all kinds of people, you know, with them and traveling in large packs. We've also worked to keep the trick-or-treating early, and this is for two different reasons. One, it will keep down, hopefully, the trick-or-treating by the older kids, who might be the ones who would not be there with their parents and might have a little bit more problem with staying socially distanced. And it also does create the time where we would be getting the people off the streets just as dusk happens, in case there is any kind of an increase with Triple E and West Nile virus. Last year, we did move the trick-or-treating suggested time to earlier to in response to that. Right now, the Board of Health is reporting fewer positive tests on mosquitoes in the pools in Manchester than last year, so we're hoping it keeps that way. The other thing that we have asked the Board of Health to do is to give us some messaging, which would be the best way to express this and get this out. We know that we're not going to be having the trick-or-treating police. If someone's out trick-or-treating at 7 o'clock at night and there are still people there giving things out, we're not going to go around and say, oh no, we're not supposed to be doing this, but we're going to strongly encourage that the trick-or-treating in their own neighborhoods happen for just a short period of time. And you can see at the bottom, it does say, you know, no doorbells or approaching houses, and residents who don't feel comfortable to participate should stay in their homes. So that would mean that they would hopefully keep their front porch lights off, and they wouldn't have anybody out front encouraging people to come up and talk to them. So with that, I'll open it up and see if anyone has any questions about the plan or anything that you want to comment on the plan.
I think it sounds very good.
Jeff, you're muted.
I have one particular comment. Thank you, Ann. Which is the Board of Selectmen is firmly in line with the fact that no streets will be blocked off, so that crowds don't get concentrated. Regarding the other aspects of this, I'll take comments from the board, but I don't think we have much to say in terms of what people actually do, other than we support these recommendations. And but it would, but any resolution by the board to support these recommendations would be contingent on further review on Thursday by the Board of Health, and the fact that they did not lessen the restrictions that they're suggesting.
Mhm.
Tom, I would like to say this looks so well thought out, and just so many different aspects that have been really attended to. You all just really did a nice job for the kids who are missing out on so much right now. So this looks just my sincere thanks to you and the whole group who've done this.
Thank you, Becky.
Also, are there any more of the 375th puzzles left?
Wait a minute. One thing at a time.
Yes.
Seriously, Becky. The chair is going to mute Becky.
I wouldn't blame the chair.
John?
Tom, you got my 100% support on this. I think it's great.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Okay, so it seems like there's a consensus. I would actually like to put this in the form of a motion in support of the planned presentation to the Board of Health for their review and acceptance of the Board of Health's decision unless there is some lessening of the restrictions. In which case, it should come back to the Board of Selectmen.
I support that.
Is that a second?
Second. If Becky's wasn't a second.
Okay. I'll take roll call vote. John Round,
Yes, yes.
Ann Harrison,
Yes.
Miss Jakes,
Absolutely.
Mr. Boyd Turner says yes. Tom, good luck at the Board
Thank
of
you.
Health.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Yep.
you, for, and echoing the other comments, thank you for all your work on this.
All right, thank you. Do you want me to stay on for the 375th anniversary celebration committee?
Sure.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, hold on one second, Tom. Too many papers.
Is that under consent agenda?
It is on the consent agenda.
Yeah.
And since we are well past 7:15, which was the last item that was timed in the agenda, I think we could take that item up right now. It's in the consent agenda. This is the only item. I'm going to pull it out of the consent agenda for a minute. And basically, it's a proposal to do some moving lighting on the town common that would project snowflakes up on the church and on the town hall. First Parish Church has agreed to this. And they plan to use the carillon system in the church, which is the speaker system that allows the community to hear music from the church, to project carols half an hour every evening.
What we realize is that there will be no big celebration and, you know, huge First Parish Church full of people when they have the lighting of the friendship tree. In fact, the friendship tree will probably just get lit at some point after Thanksgiving, probably without a notification to stop the gathering of people there. But what we hope to be able to do is to have an illumination of the two buildings and then also have the carillon play seasonal music or Christmas carols for a half hour every night. So if people are downtown, they can stop and listen, or they, you know, we'll get it out in the paper that it's, you know, what the time is. We're looking for just after the 6 o'clock bells ring, basically, until for about a half an hour until roughly 6:30 every night, and just to kind of, shall we say, bring a little joy, and it also have it early enough because it is dark then, so families can bring down younger children and have some of the joy that they missed because they can't have the musical performance at the First Parish Church. or anything with the gathering afterwards with the cocoa and the lighting of the tree.
Thank you, Tom. So that's a consent agenda item. I'm going to slip it back into the consent agenda, but I wanted to have him have an opportunity to say what he had to say without having to hang around until we get to it.
I've got one question, Jeff,
Yes.
and that is, Tom, how long would this go for? How many days? Have you envisioned a time period here? Understood it would start probably the evening when you light the tree, but for how?
Yeah, and then go to Christmas Eve or Christmas night, something like that, John. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So it might be a total of 30 days. I haven't actually looked to see when Thanksgiving is this year, but it might be 30 days all total.
Okay. So somewhere, maybe it's a day or two after Christmas or something, but somewhere in there.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. And I can update you that, yes, Christmas carols are available. In fact, I think those chimes, the carillons do play Christmas carols seasonally and have done for a number of years.
Mhm.
And we can, and there are others that are available, and I know that that's being worked on so that can be done at this time, at the 6 o'clock or 6:30 time when the light show goes on.
Yeah. Thank you, John. I know you're part of the team that's been working on that.
Yep.
The snowflakes, polychromatic, exploding, or just nice white snowflakes?
They're the same projectors that people sometimes use to project them on the front of their homes. And we've been working with Chuck Dam to get coverage. And I think there'd just be the white snowflakes moving on the buildings.
That would be much nicer. Thank you.
Are there any issues, Tom, about security of those projectors?
I hope not. You can't say definitely not, but we've got 2 already, and we're trying to make sure that we have enough coverage, and if we need to get a 3rd one, we'll get a 3rd one.
And where will the power be coming from?
There's a handhole in the new town common, kind of at the bottom of the central bottom of the stairs from the front of town hall.
Yep.
And that's where the power will come from.
And I know this is probably answered, but will there be a means by which the cords will be secured to the ground so they're not tripping hazards?
Yeah, we've kind of let Chuck Dam give us guidance on that, and we're waiting to hear back from him. We've met with Chuck Dam and Sean Johnson out at the new common and by that handhole to go over that. But there will not be a safety issue.
Okay, thank you.
You are welcome.
Okay, I'd like to move on. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the board. Have a good night.
Good night, Tom.
Thanks.
Night.
Take it
Okay,
easy after that drive.
I'll be
great.
in.
Back to COVID update, merchant support ideas.
So this, is an ongoing challenge, and looking to see if you have perhaps some new ideas that with the holiday season coming, that maybe there are ways that we can help the businesses in town through promotion. Certainly, Shop Local has a heightened meaning this year, and it'll be very important for the stability of our retailers in town. And so there's been some conversations that are getting underway. We'd like to continue those over the next few weeks to see what we might be able to put into place. There was a new flyer that was developed during the revised Festival by the Sea, and that listed all the businesses in town, all the shops and restaurants, and also indicated where public parking is located, in addition to the on-street parking. And so that's something that we can perhaps have a second printing and make sure those are well distributed around town. Perhaps they are put out on the entranceways of businesses or on the parking posts, and some sort of a holder for them. Need to make sure they're secure and that the weather doesn't get at them. Want to keep them dry and in place rather than wet and blowing around. So some challenges there, but maybe some temporary signboards, et cetera, indicating listing businesses in different sections of town. That might be something that we can do. Helping on our website, perhaps we do some joint promotions that we could make available. Tend to shy away from that during normal times, just in terms of public sector and private businesses. But maybe this is a time where we blur those distinctions a bit, just because of the unusual circumstances. I will say that we are offering a second round of grants to small businesses. These are businesses with 5 employees or less, including the owner. We do have, we still have some remaining up to $10,000 grants available for such businesses in town. They can be home-based or retail. And does not be retail, any shop or any business that's operating, whether or not they're in a brick and mortar or out of the home. So those are still available, and we are making another second round. So they'll be due, next round is due the end of the month. We'll get another email out to all businesses that we have emails for to remind them of this. But it is something that we want to encourage people to apply for. There are income thresholds over which disqualifies the owner. But if you're under those thresholds, then you do qualify, and we encourage those who do qualify to put in the submittals. And again, we'll publicize those, but I did want to put that out there. We just got the word the other day that they'll be doing a second round because the first round was did not take all the monies that were allocated to the town. So we do have that ability to do a second round. So the main focus here is to hear what ideas you might have. We hope to meet with some business folks later this week to have a more in-depth conversation about what they see as beneficial and ways that we might help facilitate some cooperative advertising, some other ways of promotion. So I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts if you have some ideas that you might want us to pursue.
I wanted to share a note that I received from Eli, that he is in support of doing temporary signage around the downtown area to list merchants and help to direct people towards them. And also to emphasize where parking is. He also made a suggestion about a better map on the town website, maybe a QR code on those brochures for phones to scan.
That's a great idea.
Mm.
I was also thinking, along what Eli was saying regarding signage, wondering, I think typically we're not supposed to have sandwich boards out, but I think as much help as we can offer regarding signage is sort of some of the least we can do. Regarding Festival by the Sea, and I know that needs to be rethought, but is there a way that without too much contact, we could possibly do weekly raffles of some sort where if an item is raffled off and won, I don't know, I'm trying to think of ways to get people into the shops a little bit more, but spread out.
So you're suggesting that the chamber run such a raffle?
I don't know. I honestly don't know, Jeff. I'm just wondering, is that what legally, I know the town's hands are tied in a lot of ways. So I don't really know to what extent we're legally allowed to do things. And I'm looking at the bridge Cape Ann that somebody just said, and I've seen this before for ideas. Has anybody else checked that out?
I've looked at it.
Okay, I'm not seeing a lot of things there, but anyway, I would like to hear what the merchants themselves, how they feel we might be able to help them.
Right, so we hope to hear from them this week.
Because you just don't want to ask them to continue to do coupons and discounts further. It's already been tough enough for them, but I don't know. Other than as Eli suggested, signage would be very good.
I think one of the issues with sandwich boards becomes the issue of inclement weather.
Right. Well, that wouldn't go beyond the holidays. You know, I wouldn't imagine at this point.
And you're assuming our drought is going to continue right through Christmas.
Absolutely. No, you can bring a sandwich board in if the weather gets bad, but.
And there's also the ADA issues of not all of our sidewalks are as wide as they might be. And
True. Yep.
But perhaps there can be some kind of suggestions from the businesses when they meet with Greg that we can be supportive of.
Maybe we could even ask, just ask the townspeople what's going to help incentivize you.
Right. So that people get off their computers and go into the shops.
Exactly.
So any other comments or concerns or ideas that people want to make?
So we'll see what the merchants have to say. We'll try to reach out to folks, maybe do a little mini polling, and we'll hopefully bring back to you on the 19th some more ideas.
Okay, good. Thank you. We certainly want to support them. Greg, do you have any idea whether they're planning any kind of Christmas by the sea?
Yes, they are. Again, they're trying to see how best to shape that. And I think we can dovetail some of our thoughts with them on that and see if it's something we can help with.
Yeah.
I think Festival of by the Sea is usually a big outdoor fun event, outdoor, indoor.
That's a separate event.
The Festival by the Sea?
We've already had it.
Oh, Holiday by the Sea, sorry.
Yeah, it's
Or
like a Christmas stroll. It was
Yes,
some like a
yes.
late afternoon, 4 hours.
Yep, yep.
Right.
And I think that's worked in the past years, hasn't it, Greg?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Santa Claus arrives by boat and.
And that afternoon was the whatever. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
We got to be careful about Santa Claus in the boat.
Correct. So yeah, we need to, Santa may have some different plans this year. We'll have
Yeah.
to see.
Well, I had one suggestion just texted to me. Not that there are a lot of them, but what about sort of bit of forgiveness on parking for retail businesses?
What does that mean?
What do you think it means?
Does it mean having the people who work in the shops take the parking spaces that should be used by customers?
No, it means that our local constabulary, which are very nice anyway, are a little more lenient with parking tickets.
Which leads to people who are there for over 2 hours taking up spaces that could be used by somebody who wants to go in shopping.
It could go both ways. I know. It's just a thought that someone sent out.
Okay. To save you from interpreting other people's texts, I'm going to open this very briefly to public comment. If there's any public comments about how we might be as supportive as possible to our businesses as we approach the holiday season. So if you'd like to make a comment, just raise your hand on the menu bar at the bottom, and we'll recognize you. Okay. Seeing none, we can move on. Liaison project updates. So, Becky, do you have any planning board updates?
I do. Planning board met on the 28th. There was a curb cut discussed. 40B LC, the 40B and the LCD were discussed. And we will be meeting with the planning board soon. Concom, they're working with Concom regarding the Surf Village water issue. And there's a 40B working group that with the online forum where over 70 people attended. Then this evening, before this meeting, there was the planning board recodification meeting where various definitions were gone over just to sort of solidify some definitions which will then be brought forward eventually to the town for parsing out and approval. There you go. Short and sweet.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you, Jeff.
I have nothing new to report on open space and recreation plan. They're in the process of putting together all the information that they collected in their survey. It's been a lot of surveys. And Ann,
I have made some observations. I will be working on them next week, in the next 2 weeks.
okay, thank you very much. We'll look forward to those on the 19th. Consent agenda. We have the board meetings from September 21st. We have the request for the illumination of Town Hall that Mr. Keogh went over earlier. The affirmation of the plastic bag ban. The governor has rescinded his order, which temporarily allowed plastic bags to be given out in retail and grocery stores. And we are back to, our existing ordinance. So this doesn't require us to vote on reinstating the ordinance. The governor has lifted his temporary ban on those ordinances. And our ordinance is now back in effect. So there should be no plastic bags being given out in stores, retail, and grocery.
How do we make sure that they're aware of that?
So the Board of Health has communicated, or will do a reminder. I know that we were in touch with Crosby's, and they indicated that they were stopping as of last week sometime. So we can follow up.
Okay, and that's the only store that does, we don't, Allen's or the Richdales, they don't do plastic?
Not that we're made aware of, but again, we can do a general reminder.
Okay, I just think that it would behoove us to do that.
Allen's continued to use plastic bags throughout the summer. Excuse me, paper bags throughout the summer.
Okay,
Yes.
Yeah.
thank you.
I think the governor also allowed reusable bags to be brought into the stores.
Yes.
And maybe the reminder could include that.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't, if those of us who use reusable bags don't have to do all our own bagging, the lines will go a little faster. I'm a slow bagger.
Okay. Other items in the consent agenda include the confirmation of legal counsel, and this is that letter that was in your packet at the end from Eli. Greg, can you clarify the need for that?
Yeah, so this is actually part of our paperwork for reimbursement through the feds, through the COVID reimbursements that have been allowed, the CARES Act, and also with FEMA. They just want affirmation, confirmation of legal counsel. So Dan Brown from Feely and Brown is our labor counsel, and then we use KP Law, as you know, for general counsel. And so having your affirmation of this as part of your consent agenda will allow Eli then to sign the confirmation memo and get that as part of our reimbursement paperwork.
Okay. And finally, the general election warrant. And you'll notice that was absent from your packet. And I contacted Greg before the meeting about that. Sonia graciously went to Town Hall and scanned it and emailed it to me. And I bounced that email on to each of you at the beginning of this meeting with a note in the chat to each of you. I was planning on putting it up on my screen, and I can do that, but if you've taken an opportunity to open that while we've been talking, it's a fairly detailed and standard piece of procedure that has to occur prior to our having a general election. So we need to vote on this as part of the consent agenda, and if there's any questions about the general election warrant, I would entertain them now.
Where specifically is this from where did it come from?
So it basically comes from the state,
Okay,
Secretary of State, and then we add our particulars in terms of our polling information. So it adds the fact that we have our polling at the high school this year.
Okay.
Okay, and that's also something that you all need to get to town hall to sign off on.
Yeah, so we'd love it to, if, assuming you approve this tonight, if you could come in over the next few days to actually sign it, then we'll.
And
we'll know.
I checked with Sonia, since Eli is out of town all week. I checked with Sonia and asked how many signatures are necessary, and she said a minimum of 3.
Correct.
So the game is afoot.
I can go in tomorrow, so I'll get that. I'll be there.
Okay. That concludes our consent agenda. Are there any last minute comments or concerns about the minutes of September 21st?
No.
Okay, then I need to take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second,
And polling, Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Bodman Turner, votes yes. All right, finally, we have our very talkative tonight, town administrator, who has helped me get through this meeting, and his town administrator report. Greg, you're on.
All right, thanks, Jeff, and thanks for running tonight's meeting. So first up, very pleased to announce that we will be having a new public health nurse, Mary Higgins, resident in town, who's an RN, actually a nurse practitioner, will be joining us as Pam retires once again. Pam Zacconi has repeatedly helped us out here, and she is doing a transition with Mary over the next couple of weeks and getting Mary up to speed. Mary's last assignment was actually doing contact tracing with COVID, so she's quite familiar with those details, and obviously that's a very helpful skill to bring to the table as we continue to deal with COVID.
Hopefully third time is a charm for Pam.
Yeah. No, I think we're in good shape here. I'm very pleased to have Mary come on board, and she is too. So happy to make that announcement. Construction updates. The fall paving will get started in the next week or two. Moving to wrap up in early November. The focus will be on repaving Raymond Street, Magnolia Avenue, and Ocean Street as a follow-up to the pipe work that had taken place in those areas. The waterline work on Boardman Avenue and Harbor Street continues to go well. Actually, I should have brought the show and tell and maybe shared it in my video screen here, but I didn't. There's a great sample of the lining work that has taken place. It's quite remarkable, the lining that they can install in place on the cast iron pipes. It makes a watertight seal and really improves the integrity and strength of those old pipes without having to dig them all up. So that's gone well, and it continues to move along, and we'll be wrapping up in the next couple of weeks there. People probably have noticed that the honor roll work has started on the town common, and so that'll be progressing over the next few weeks, and we're hoping that that can be wrapped up in time for a Veteran Day ceremony. That's what we're shooting for. At your next meeting on the 19th, we plan to do an update to some of the safety zones and speed limits in town. We've been talking about this, and we're ready to bring that forward to you in a formal hearing for your formal votes. As you know, we're adjusting rather than having a blanket safety zone encompassing much of the village. We will do more targeted safety zones, and areas not in a safety zone will go to that 25-mile-an-hour standard. And then some of the outlying streets, the upper end of Pine and School, will be at that higher 35-mile-an-hour zone. So we'll anticipate doing that at your meeting on the 19th. Becky mentioned the 40R. There's a large turnout. Great to see so many people on the first public forum. That's just the first of many that'll take place. We weren't able to get all the answers to the questions during the meeting itself, but we are working on those answers and we'll be posting those answers this week and soliciting people's input. Jeff, you mentioned the survey, and we'll be soliciting that. I think they're going to be extending that survey a few more days. We'll get that confirmed and get that notice out to people if indeed that's the case. But I think that's my understanding. They're going to let that be open for a few more days.
But until we know that for sure, you should go and do it tonight.
Yes, very good. A resident in town has been advocating for some pollinator gardens, some plantings of flowers that natural flower, native flowers that attract pollinators, bees, and others. Going to do a couple of pilot sites on some grounds that the DPW currently mows, so it saves us a little bit of mowing and hopefully bring in more butterflies and bees, which is a good thing. Conservation Commission has been involved with that and endorsed it as well. And finally, we are continuing to work on technology to allow us to do these virtual meetings as a hybrid meeting. Board members can be meeting in person with some good distancing, and yet can still be in the same room and project through the Zoom medium here, and the public can participate via Zoom, but allow board members the ability to interact in the same room, which a number of boards have really missed. And so we hope to be able to bring that on board in the next few weeks or so. So stay tuned on that. So with that, I'll end, and thank you for your time this evening.
Okay. Any questions or comments on Greg's report?
Thank you, Greg.
All right, fine. Any other matters that have not been reasonably anticipated by the chair? And I would entertain a
A
motion
motion to
to adjourn.
adjourn. So moved.
Second,
Okay, polling, Ms. Jakes,
yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Bodmer-Turner gratefully says yes.
Well, thank you, Jeff.
Your voice made it.
Exactly.